This is Critical Nonsense, our high-lowbrow show about culture, science, and tech. This week, Joey, Aaron, and I talk about over-contextualizing.
Woo!
Happy birthday from Applebee's to you. We heard it is your birthday. This is what Joey sounds like.
You really. This is what an Aaron sounds like.
Because this is what an executive producer and human flair, Jess Vander, sounds like.
Hi, this is Jess. Also, question. Ever since Happy Birthday was opened to the Creative Commons, how many restaurants do you think have kept singing their Happy Birthday variant instead of just reverting to the standard Happy Birthday song?
I like the variants better.
I do too. People deserve their royalties. Like, give me that weird birthday song, Chili's. Give me that weird birthday song, Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah. It's just right.
I only can think of the Applebee's one. I'm maybe like if you sang another one, I might know it, but I don't. What is Chili's Happy Birthday song?
I assume it is Chili's birthday back things. I assume. I don't know that. I am casting aspersions and starting rumors. That's what I'm doing.
Speaking of Creative Commons, the check's in the mail, Chili's.
Housing?
Clean.
Housekeeping? Clean.
Rate, review,
subscribe. Tell a friend. Submit ideas to us at criticalnonsense@sylvain.co. Send us ideas, thoughts, feedback, questions, recommendations for Christmas gifts, positive affirmations. Negative affirmations send to criticalnonsense@wedon'twantthem.com. Justin, appreciate that. I think that's it. House clean.
So, Giuseppe, I hear that you have a thing on your mind. You have a thought?
Yeah.
In your head there? Yeah.
I do. And so first I want to preempt this with, no, I don't. I don't want to preempt this with anything. I've been noticing a behavior for a little while, and this, I'm not immune to this. I want to talk about it. So we'll go into it. That is the example of it. Right? I just did the thing that I want to talk about.
What are you talking about, though?
I love it. You're still doing it.
I'm building it up because the thing I want to talk about is over-preempting our thoughts and speech and writing. Like hyper-contextualizing and preempting everything that we say in this way that slowly is increasingly making it to where you have to decipher so much of the written or verbal communications that we have with each other. And I had been noticing it in, writing that I was seeing in a professional context. I don't think it happens as much in sort of personal context, maybe where you're in a space where you know someone, you have a level of familiarity and they know you, where people are not sort of caveating and preempting their speech as much. But certainly in the professional context and in writing emails I'm seeing from clients or our team or wherever, my own, probably your own also, that there's this sort of, I'm going to say something, but first let me tell you all of the things that you have to know about the entire existence of life before I tell you the one thing. And oftentimes it is this behavior, I think, that is sort of emergent as a product of, in quotes, cancel culture, whatever that means. I don't want to go back into the discussion of is that real or not? Who knows? But it's also sort of a product of having more sensitive conversations publicly and things like that. But it has sort of cascaded into other places where sensitivity is not necessarily required of like, what's your favorite sandwich? Well, first, let me just say that like those types of things like don't need it, but I think the behavior is sort of emerged as a product of these other things. And it started to solidify for me. Like I'd seen the behavior and I started seeing people making jokes about it online. I saw one like a week or two ago that said, "I'm sorry, my tweet about me didn't take your entire life's context into consideration," like from a comedian. And I had seen one a few months ago that said, let me just pull it up. "There's an extraordinary defensive style of writing where I can recognize if someone is probably active on Twitter or not by how often they include weird preemptive defenses of positions no sane person would ever take." And so my question for you is, how do we stop being so preemptive?
Well, if we're stopping being preemptive, it's because we are no longer afraid of the thing we're trying to prevent, right? Like the only reason this is happening is because people are scared and have some kind of deep fear of, I guess, whatever the opposite of over-contextualizing is, which is like out of contextualizing or something like it.
Under contextualizing.
Sure. But I guess, but not just the act of not having enough, but that your thing will be taken out of context and then something is going to happen, or someone might think something bad that will damage you. And I guess to figure out how to avoid that, I wonder first we have to see if that fear is even itself valid. And if it is valid, then how do we avoid that? And if it isn't valid, then like, why is everyone worried about this thing?
I love the question of fear validity, because I very strongly feel that all fear is valid because it's an emotion. And I'm being a little pedantic and semantic at the same time, I acknowledge. But I think that the idea that if the fear actually, let's pretend that the fear is valid, and it's more so about the repercussions being real or threatening.
Yeah, it's the threat. It's more is the threat valid or not?
Yeah, and is the threat impending? Is it something that is actually going to attack you? Because like, as someone who, you know, is maybe prone to a little bit of contextualizing a bit much here or there, I can at least recognize like the sword and shield of context. It can be used to help other. Yes. Video game references from Jess. I'm very excited about this. It can be used to ensure that others meet you where you want them to meet you, and that you are taken, and that your thoughts are taken in the way that you intend. But it can also be used to set context in a way that you can lay a trap. Like, talk to any lawyer, anyone who's doing a cross-examination. Like, so much of the contextualization or controlling the context is about setting plots for other people to fall into their own, to trip over themselves. And I think that while there might be a hypersensitivity or an increased sensitivity that's bringing people, I guess, around and maybe like too over contextualizing, I think hopefully it's an exercise that will find like a new medium. Like hopefully the people who are over contextualizing are those who never contextualized in the first place, or whose context that they are bringing is frequently silenced and therefore starts to get adopted by others and doesn't require communication. And I think a piece to add to that too is just like, I love the type of work that we do, because over the course of our careers, we zigzag from industry to industry, from like challenge to challenge, and we are always more naive and less informed than the other folks around us in many, many cases. And in many ways, that hypercontextualization can be a way to have people meet you where you need them to meet you, and how to interpret your perspective that could otherwise, if left up to chance, lead to some of those bad outcomes that you're talking about. The threat of you dumb, you fired, choose your thing that comes after you. And those are real in all cases.
You basic.
Whether or not they're impending. You basic. Whether or not they're going to happen to you is always something that we're guarding against, and hence the hypercontextualization.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I think the way, Joey, you brought this question to us, I started on sort of the negative repercussions, but certainly even from my own experience of you contextualizing, I guess I wouldn't call that over-contextualizing. I would just say it's contextualizing, and that has helped me learn and grow as a professional in my career. So I guess my question is, at what point is it going too far?
Yeah, I think all of everything that y'all said makes a ton of sense, right? It is sort of like a fear-based response, and the sort of impending threat of seeing people face repercussions for their actions right now in very public ways creates a dynamic in which, if you're seeing it in a hyper-present way, that you then would fear for it for yourself as almost like a sympathetic response to seeing that publicly. I think it's sort of in the way that you hear conversations about people who are sort of like barely above the poverty line fighting against the taxation of billionaires in the event that they may someday also become a billionaire or things like that. Like, there is this sort of preemptive fear that you will be punished for a thing that you're not actually doing or being or whatever. But there's also sort of maybe the better way to think about it is like there's a more effective way to do the contextualizing versus like the preemptive way, because I think a lot of the issues that I have with it is that it can become a sort of defense mechanism to never actually say anything, right? Yes. Which is is sort of the issue I have with it. It's not about like that people should not be taking into consideration context, or that people should consider all scenarios in, it's like, I don't have an opinion about it from a sort of a perspective of like being more considerate and being more thoughtful and being more empathetic and considering others. Like, I think all of those things are great, but from a sort of rhetorical perspective, it feels ineffective and sort of creates a dynamic in which you shroud yourself in sort of meaningless language oftentimes because of this fear-based exercise, to where then you don't actually formulate a perspective. And I feel like if you don't have a perspective, then you can't even shift that perspective to like a more right or more appropriate or contextualized way. It just becomes like, well, you surround a thing with so much context that you don't actually know how you think about it. And so you can't even adjust your ideas, right? And so it's almost like if you at least state an opinion and then add context, someone can track your line of thought of like why you feel that way about a thing or whatever, that you like red pants or donuts or whatever. But like, if you're like, I love donuts, but like, it's like, I don't want to sound like someone who is discriminatory against all types of pastries, but my perspective is that donuts, while good, and like if you sort of surround a thing with so much stuff, you never actually get to the point.
I mean, maybe. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to come in and like completely dismantle. I actually think you said something in the middle there that stood out to me, which is, I think that when we think about it as a fear-based response, that is totally true. But I also think that a lot of that hypercontextualization does come from a hyper-empathetic response of trying to put yourself in the perspective of someone who would poke holes in your argument, for example, or who is essentially to be in an attempt to be more persuasive. And yet, regardless of whether it's born of fear or empathy, both energized, you still end up with the same problem, which is surrounding it with nothing words. And what's interesting is that like it's a very effective political rhetorical move. of like, that's what politicians do. They get out of tricky questions by doing that. And then you end up with these things that are like, everybody's nodding their heads and clapping their hands. And it's like, but what the thing? And I do think that there is, and that's where I guess like contextualization with the appropriate amount of empathy and with an appropriate amount of fear can be very, very effective. Because then it can dismantle arguments. It can also be something that you stand on to force others to recognize context that gets ignored or overlooked. And if I may, by bringing the voice up super, super high, the idea of the simple notion of being direct and forthright is scary to a lot of people because of real counter considerations and judgments that come from from speaking directly. And I think learning a language that allows you to feel comfortable being direct when you need to and allowing yourself to hide when you feel the need to because you feel threatened. I think that being able to pull that lever, to be able to pull from that different toolkit can be really helpful for people.
I guess I wonder if that is having a very specific type of context that you lay, or having quite a high volume of context that you establish, still to me does not necessarily signify overdoing, right? Because in the cases you're describing, Aaron, that may be very valid and very necessary and not like going too far or trying to protect yourself from a thing that isn't likely going to affect you. It seems like in some cases it's a very necessary defense.
It feels a little bit like Inside Out. Like there's a role for everything to play, but still when any one of those roles is out of whack, it may not serve you as much, or it starts to have other consequences when indulged in too much. And I do think that there is just an issue of communication. There's just a very practical thing about what is it that you are saying? What is it that you are communicating to me? And when we let that fear and empathy block everything out, we can't communicate well.
Yeah.
The idea just doesn't come through.
Yeah, there's something, there's something that you're saying that made me think about like Minnesota nice. Sorry to anyone who is from Minnesota. I know this is not true of all people. I just know it sort of conceptually as Minnesota nice. And so
get your hot dish. Yeah.
Yeah, where it's like I'm gonna say something really mean to you, but say it in a way that ostensibly seems nice. And so therefore it's like you're sort of protected in your meanness by like presenting it as nice, like the sort of indirectness of communication to sort of like do a thing you want to do, but like shroud it or hide it. And that like that directness conversation is interesting because in order to be direct, you have to be in a mindset of openness, right? And like you said, of safety and all of these other things. And I think there is sort of like ungracious interpretation is rampant, and the stick is rampant, where like in a single communication, if you don't provide all context, that like even if everyone, like the majority of people think it's undue or unjust, like the threat of just someone saying like, but you didn't consider this, gotcha, like I guess it is sort of omnipresent.
And especially for, I mean, this is the public figure. It is blah, 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 blah. I would highly recommend that everybody, again, listen to the triptych that was on the podcast. You ought to know. No, I've been watching a lot of Alanis Morissette stuff lately.
You.
I will remember the name of the podcast. You're wrong about. That's it. The You're Wrong About triptych that's all about cancel culture, just because one of the things that they pulled out is this idea that the people that are on Twitter, for example, that hold that stick, represent such a minute group of the overall human population. But it only takes one day of 1,000 people on Twitter to say something to you or about you for your world to come crumbling down.
Yeah.
If any one of us had 1,000 people say your feet stank all day long, it would hurt. Like they really. How did you smell that?
My feet don't stink.
My dog likes them. He licks them every once in a while.
Like
it's
corn
weird.
Chips.
Yes. I agreed with that too much. I do think that, though, the idea that individuals can be taken down by a very small group of people is real. And I don't think that yes, I'm holding back from as well getting into the whole accountability culture versus cancel culture, all that stuff. But I do believe that we are, as a society today, a lot more cognizant, to your point, of the wages of being wrong publicly, because it seems like it goes beyond being publicly shamed. You can be basically tarred and feathered or lose your livelihood for making a mistake. And regardless of whether or not that mistake was in goodwill or not, like, hence the contextualization, hence the shield version, the Pikachu version of contextualization.
Did you have a comment about something, Jess? You had your hand up about Minnesota Nice or something?
It was about Minnesota Nice and just thinking of it as the expanded universe of the backhanded compliment, but you can actually apply it to anything.
Yeah.
Oh my! I mean, I bring this up every once in a while. I heard it called in the South. Sorry, Mom. Grin-fucking. When you just like smile at someone and you're just like, oh, it's so nice.
Oh, that's a horrible phrase. Oh, I don't like it.
Yeah, grin fuck or smile fuck is like, I'll smile to your face, and as soon as you turn around, stab you in the back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to kind of shift a little bit and think about this too as, I think this is a behavior that is born out of the public forum, right? Like you were saying, Aaron, right? Like you say something on Twitter and like a vocal minority yells at you about something and you feel like the whole world is against you or that everyone agrees or whatever, even if it seems like sort of like reductio ad absurdum, like this sort of just reduce it to like, you forgot a comma, so you're an asshole. But I think that sort of public forum dynamic that exists, that I think you encapsulated perfectly, is creating a behavior that then is extending into non-public forum context that is making it difficult to communicate. Like the fear and the stick that y'all have been talking about is real, but then we're taking the fear of the stick into environments where maybe the stick doesn't exist and is sort of like creating bad behaviors. Like for us, right, as strategists, the sort of sharpness and clarity of thought and writing and communications is vital, right? It is sort of like that all of the work is in some way like fundamentally predicated on those things, and the necessity or the fear of those things in other environments coming into that work becomes like potentially a detriment to your ability to do work. Like you still need to understand context and you still need to be empathetic and you need to be, thoughtful and circumspect about the ways in which you're sort of leveraging your power as someone that it is like being paid to give perspective and guide people into action. And also you have to be able to do that in like a rhetorically effective and clear way. And so, in that sort of opening question of like, how do we stop being so preemptive? Like, one, I'm leading in that case saying like, there are instances where we shouldn't be, right? Which maybe is a hot take, maybe isn't a hot take. I'm not sure, but I think that idea of like, can you do the order of operations correctly, of like, state your thought clearly, explain rationale, and be open to evolution or challenge or whatever. But even in saying those things, right, it sort of demands an open environment, a safe environment, sort of the removal of fear of reprisal, sort of like a good faith interpretation, all of those things. And so maybe the answer is like, yes, you can and should, but you also can and need to be in an environment that sort of like has that context, I guess. I don't know.
And I mean, I'm not just bringing it back to swords and shields because I feel like it's whatever, but that does feel closer to the sword, where you're using it proactively. You're being thoughtful about what context you're setting, not necessarily to actually trap someone or injure them, but you're doing it for a specific purpose. And I love what you just said about the order of operations, because it should be, context is essentially infinite. Like, there's so much that can be said that is going to add color to a point, that it's not about giving all of the context. It's never about giving all of the context. It's about giving the context that best helps communicate your core idea. Mm-hmm. And that actually means leaving a lot of context out of it. That means being really, really thoughtful about when and if context is needed, because perhaps the listener already has the context in their mind, because like that's the way they're looking at it. And I think that I love this sort of the transition to speaking about it within the context of our work, or this type of work, because I think that it is something that's really valuable for, I don't know, other types of work for my future job as Oprah, part 2.
Applications out.
I think that she knocked on my door last week, and I'm trying to be the next Oprah. But specifically Adele.
For you listener, Aaron has literally physically changed his posture to become Oprah.
I literally did. She is amazing and awesome. I think that understanding the power of simplicity and clarity and appreciating it will get you to a place in which you can feel comfortable being direct, even when you are not in a safe space. Because that's the other thing. You will be in spaces that do not welcome your directness. That's just true. Yep. And you finding a way to sit with that in your own sense of safety only helps you. It only moves you forward and only makes you more powerful.
Yeah, there's what you said about like there's infinite context, like makes me think about like complexity theory and like like Lorentz attractors and things like that, of like within complexity theory, like the reason why you can only predict the weather reasonably accurately like 12 hours into the future is because you don't have enough data points to like effectively do it. And in this case, right, the sort of like bounds of what a discussion is about is sort of like important, and maybe is like the simplest way to sort of establish a context is like, I'm talking about this boundary. And to your point, it's like it is impossible to factor all context into every conversation. Like not just in like the sort of impossibility of like data compression to like have a conversation and factor all context, but also the sort of like inability as a human to be able to think of all of like the context and sort of the sort of extended implications of like the butterfly effect of like any given situation or opinion. And that sort of like what is the threshold? Like, what is the threshold of the appropriate amount of context? I think is, how wide do you set the boundary of like what you're considering and where the context is important. Like if you're stating like a personal opinion about things you like or don't like or food or whatever, like you don't need to consider the entire history of culinary art globally across all, like it's like I like pizza. Like you don't have to be like, well, actually pizza was not invented by the Italians. It was invented by the flatbread of the Sumerians, which
you make this joke, but then recall the most recent huge faux pas of the opinion food writer who wrote about how all Indian food is curry and that he doesn't like it. And it was a tremendous mistake in under-contextualizing.
Well, yeah, because that's just like wrong. like that's not
but I love the way that Jess put it. It's a tremendous mistake in under-contextualization.
Yeah.
Like maybe the person had it. Maybe they knew and they just didn't say it. But by gee golly willikers, you might have shoulda coulda.
Very bad.
A tremendous mistake in under-contextualization.
Put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
There's a phrase that you also said, Joey, about the tremendous data compression of information, and I think I just go ahead and put a light bulb on that, and then I throw it into two walls that are converging behind Jessica, because I believe that this is Jess's wrap up. Corner. Segue done.
Yes. The walls are closing in on me.
Here comes the data compression.
It's coming really fast. Make it stop.
I think it's simple. Do release your context inhibitions to the extent that feels safe and right for you.
Damn.
Well, Jess, are you considering that when I was talking to someone one time that I felt differently?
Yes. When I was 12 years old, I
released my data inhibitions and I was hit.
I love this. You're inspiring me to try some new things out. I'm going to try this week for Thanksgiving dinner to not contextualize and see how that goes. We're going to see. We're going to just, it's an experiment.
Wait, I have to know why Thanksgiving dinner is the location of this experiment.
Short version, seeing family. They don't live in the same city or state. There's usually so much context that I have to leave out. But what if I just say, no, I'm not going to imagine what I would say. We'll see. I'll come back with a report. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Critical Nonsense is a Sylvain production.
Brought to you by Socks. You don't get any context for that.
As always, we'd like to thank executive producer and pearl clutcher, Jess Vander.
Wow, offense.
We'd also like to thank sound engineer and all-around fill-in-the-blank, Alex Gontel. And film creator, go
Producer,
check out
director.
his film.
Give a round of applause for
Seriously.
Alex Contel's Grain.
Grain.
How cool.
Legitimately out now. Congratulations, Alex. We're really excited for everything that you've done, and everybody. What's the URL? We'll tell people to go there.
Grainthemovie.com. Go check it out.
Grainthemovie.com. Check it out.
We'd also like to thank programming coordinator and no context needed, Les Jacobs.
We'd also, of course, like to thank the contactless, contextful. Nope. Hold on, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Gilbert and Norm Estridge.
Yep. I was really trying to do something with that. It just didn't work at all.
And as always, thank you, Sorry, Ellen.
Sorry, man. And Sarah and Nora. Jeez, I'm so sorry.
Special thanks.
Family Feud, but not Steve Harvey. That's what I
Family
got.
Feud with not Steve Harvey. Got it.
Yes. Also would like to thank Guardians of the Galaxy on PS5. I've downloaded it. I haven't started yet, and I've heard it's very, very good, and I'm very excited. So that's going to happen soon.
What kind of game?
It is a third-person action adventure game, very strongly narrative-driven. Sits in that uncanny valley of like they didn't license the film's likenesses for this Guardians of the Galaxy game, but apparently it's still quite good, and very true to the comic books. So we'll see. I'm looking forward to it.
It's
Cool.
like Mass Effect type of third person choose dialogue choice type of thing.
Oh man. Mass Effect is like one of the best games ever made, period. Like full stop. So
Yeah,
I can't compare it to that. I know what you mean though. I don't know that it has that much self-guidedness. There's a little bit of that within like dialogue selections. I would tell everybody to check out the IGN review because that's what encouraged me to download it. That breaks down that it does all of the things from these types of games well enough to be exciting. But it's not like it's writing a new chapter for that style of game.
I need to consider going back and playing Mass Effect. I'd never played it myself because I got it for an ex-girlfriend and had to like help her at different points. And so I was like, well, I know what's going to happen here. So then I didn't play it myself because I was like, felt like I was getting the spoilers. And so it'd be less fun.
Point of order, did that come in the orange box? Or am I conflating?
Mass Effect? Maybe it had like a special edition one that could have come in an orange box or something.
Call of Duty Modern Warfare was in an orange box too, which I've never played. I am not a Call of Duty player at all. But I will say the remastered trilogy is on PS5. So you can play the original Mass Effect that was on PS2 now if you so choose. I will say that because Branch is replaying it. Yes.
Currently, actively right now. Yeah.
Yes.
I remember it being like good and fun and having some of that like D&D like RPG type of stuff, but also like third person shooter and all of that. So anyways, well, thanks video games. Thank you.
Yep.
We love you all.
Thanks, Joey. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, listeners.
Thanks.
Dancing. Purple sweater, purple sweater, purple sweater, purple sweater, purple sweater, purple sweater.
Yeah.
So weird.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That is incorrect. I am correcting that live. That's just blatantly false.